What's going on, everyone? It's Ozzy from OzTalksHW, and today we have a $500 brand new PC build guide. And this is going to be a step-by-step tutorial. I'm going to walk you through all the parts that we chose. We're going to go from there to building the computer step-by-step, all the way up to installing Windows, all of the drivers, all of your games, all of that stuff. So if you watch this video completely, you should have a fully built computer. Otherwise, I did something wrong. This is also the first time that the OzTalksHW team, and yes, I actually have a team now, has done something like this. So really excited, not entirely sure how this will work, but hopefully it gets pretty positive feedback. Coupled with this video guide is the official OzTalksHW website. We are finally live. We've been working on this website for about a month now, and we've been working really hard on it. And here you can find 2 articles that correspond with this video that will show you how to build a computer step by step, all written down, and also this specific computer build guide. So if you want to read that instead of watching the video, or if you just want to reference the video or reference the article, you can click on those at any time. And again, thank you guys so much for all the support and all the love. The website or any of this actually wouldn't be possible without you guys. So I'm actually very appreciative of all of you guys out there. And now for the PC build itself, this computer will be able to play a lot of modern titles at 1080p with about medium to high-ish settings. And we will test those games later on at the very end of the video. Once this is all built, this includes popular games like Fortnite and Overwatch and CSGO. So if you're looking to build a computer this Christmas for any of those games, this will be perfectly fine. While this build does not include peripherals like your monitor, your keyboard, or your mouse, I do have a $150 to $200 setup that will get you started, and link for that will be either in a card above me, like right here, or in the description below. Okay, so with all of that being said, let's get into the first part of this video, the parts that we chose. Starting off the build, for our CPU, we chose the AMD Ryzen 3 2200G. It is a quad-core chip from AMD that is unlocked, so you can overclock it if that's something that you want to dabble in. And it also comes with a pretty solid stock cooler, so you don't have to buy any aftermarket cooler. This is a great chip for the price. For under $100, you get yourself a CPU that can play pretty much any game out there at modest to decent settings, and it's cheaper than the competition. The i3-8100 was the other option from Intel, but it's about the same performance, and this one is much cheaper. The 2200G also comes with Vega. The 2200G also comes with Vega 8 graphics integrated, and although we won't be using it, it's good for troubleshooting, which we'll get into later on, in case anything does happen to your dedicated video card. The motherboard we chose is MSI's B450M Bazooka. It's a Micro ATX 2nd generation Ryzen compatible motherboard with strong RAM support, a solid amount of connectivity options, and a solid power delivery system, which makes it good for future CPU upgrades and also for overclocking. The motherboard comes with an M.2 slot, it has 4 SATA 3 ports, and it also has a ton of fan header and chassis fan connectors, as well as an RGB connection for customization later on. Also, because it is on the AM4 socket, you can upgrade to something like the Ryzen 7 2700 or 2700X in the future, and this motherboard should be okay for an upgrade that big. On top of that, with the new Ryzen rumors going around, you could be able to upgrade to something even better, such as the rumored 12-core, 10 or 12-core Ryzen chips in the future too. The RAM we have is G.Skill's 2x4 gigabyte module for a total of 8 gigs of DDR4 memory clocked at 2400 megahertz out of the box. For this build, you can be a little bit more lenient with the RAM. I would say just get the cheapest 2x4. That's very important. Make sure you get 2 sticks for a total of 8 gigs of RAM clocked at least 2400 megahertz. Later on in this video, I will overclock this RAM to 2666, which really should be the minimum for any gaming computer out there. But for starters, go with 2400 if that's all you can afford. The computer will work fine with 2133 or 2400, but for the extra $1 or $2, it's totally worth it just to have that compatibility out of the box. While 8 gigs of RAM is starting to show its age, it's definitely still more than enough for a lot of entry level and some AAA games out there. And with this motherboard, which is expandable up to 32 gigs total on all 4 slots, you can upgrade in the future. And now for arguably the most important component of your computer system for gaming, we have the video card. We chose the AMD RX 570 4GB model. As of recording this video, the RX 570 is probably the best budget card out there, especially for your money. It's so well valued considering that it's under 150 bucks and it gives you awesome performance at 1080p. 4 gigs of RAM is definitely going to be enough for the next few years for pretty much any kind of mainstream 1080p gaming, so you don't have to worry there. The model I have for this video is the Gigabyte Aorus, which goes for about $149, but similar to the RAM, you can be a little bit lenient here. Just go for the cheapest dual fan. Try to go for 2 fans, otherwise it's gonna run kind of hot model that you can find and that fits inside of your budget. An awesome perk about picking up one of these cards is that it does come with 2 free games. So even if you don't have any money for any Steam games, you get 2 free when you build this computer. A bonus of picking up one of these RX cards is that you get 2 free games. So it's a win-win situation. As far as storage is concerned, you have several different options here. The one that we're using for this video is a 120GB inland SSD and a 1TB 7200 RPM hard drive. SSD prices nowadays are dirt cheap, and SSDs can really make a computer feel a lot snappier. They're much faster than hard drives and they don't have any spinning parts, so it makes them last a little bit longer than your standard hard drive, and it makes your build a lot quieter. The 120GB SSD is going to be used for our Windows operating system and any of your frequently used apps and games, and then the 1TB drive is going to be used for any games that are too big to fit on the SSD or any other kind of storage or media. The other option, which we will not use in this video, is to get a 2TB 5400 or 7200 RPM hard drive. You are losing a lot of quickness and snappiness without having an SSD in the build, but you also double the storage effectively. So it's up to you. Do you care more about how fast your computer feels while using it, how fast your apps open up, or do you care more about having more programs to run? And lastly, the case, which is kind of hard to recommend because different builders have different priorities for the case, but we chose the Cooler Master Q300L. This is a micro ATX mini tower, so it can only fit micro ATX motherboards. Keep that in mind, that goes for about $40. The reasons why we chose this case: 1, the airflow is really good. 2, it has a lot of space in the back for cable management, which will be needed considering we are using a cheaper power supply without any kind of modularity. And 3, it has a nice design. There are downsides to the case, like it only supports 1 3.5 drive and 2 2.5 drives, but at the same time, it also supports full-length video cards. I think that's a worthy sacrifice for everything else you get. The power supply that we're using for this build, which I forgot to put on the table, is the 450 BV, BT, or BR from EVGA, with the BT being the highest quality of all 3, but any of them will work fine for these components. For only $30, which is about the maximum that I would pay for this kind of quality, you do get yourself a power supply with 80+ bronze certification, so you are saving some energy. And although it's not modular, it does work well with our case because of all of the space behind the case that allows for you to hide all of those cables and keep it out of sight and out of mind. And the optional case fan that we have is the Thermaltake Ring 12. It is a 120mm LED, blue LED fan. It works pretty well, it's pretty quiet, and you can get it for around $10 to $15. We're going to use this fan as our front intake fan, and you only really need one considering how great the airflow is in the Cooler Master Q300L. Now that you guys have seen all of the parts, let's get right into building the computer. Cool, so you guys are ready to build your first computer. Again, if you go to the OzTalksHW website, there is an in-depth article that relates to this video. You can check it out for reference if you get lost or if you just want more information. Now, there are a few tools that you'll need to build a computer. The first one is a #1 Phillips screwdriver. These things are dirt cheap, $5 or so at Home Depot or whatever vendor you want. I'm a little bit bougie, so I have a whole screwdriver set, but these things are also pretty cheap. It's about $10 at Walmart. Second thing that you might need is some kind of knife or box opening device. You're gonna have to open a lot of boxes and they will be taped up, and you could mess a few things up if you try to use your fingers, so just kind of have a knife or box cutter handy. Third thing that isn't necessary, but is more of a precaution, is an anti-static wrist strap. If you don't have one, that's fine. These are just used to ground yourself so you don't shock your components. Now, modern components are built with pretty strong static protection systems, so it will take a lot of static electricity to actually shock them and break them. Basically, all you have to do is, before you install any component inside of your computer, just touch a conductive metal piece of something around you. So like the tip of your screwdriver, that works just fine. Touch that, install what you need, and keep going on with your life. Disclaimer, do not use any of your components to ground yourself. Should kind of go without saying, but it probably won't end well. All right, cool. So now we're ready to officially start building the computer. So the motherboard is going to come with a few accessories outside of the motherboard itself, but just take out the motherboard for now. It's going to be inside of this anti-static film. Take it out of the film. Leave the box where it is, because we're going to be using that as almost kind of like our surface for building. Cool. After you get your motherboard out, you're going to install the CPU. So grab your CPU box. We have the Ryzen 3 2200G, the one and only right here. You're gonna wanna open it up with your box cutter or knife. I've already used the CPU before, so it's already open. And you're gonna take out the CPU from the side right here. You can put the box back, we will be needing it later, but for now, just take out the CPU. Before we take the CPU out of its little box, you're gonna wanna lift up this lever, as you can see right here, this little metal lever. The best way to do it is to get it from the tip. You're going to pull back towards you, and then it should automatically lift up as so. So I'm gonna do that one more time. You're gonna get the tip. That sounds dirty, but whatever. You're gonna pull it backwards towards you, and then you're gonna just lift it up. Now it's ready to accept the CPU. Now we're officially ready to install the CPU into the motherboard. Orientation is important here. You need to line up this little gold triangle with the small triangle on the socket of the motherboard, and I'll give you guys a close up so you guys can get a better idea of what that looks like. That's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is with Ryzen chips and AMD motherboards, the Ryzen logo is always going to be at the top of the socket. And the top of the socket is this small ridge right here. It should say socket AM4. The Ryzen logo will be in the same orientation as the socket right here. So once you have everything lined up properly, all you have to do is place it in the socket. It should literally fall in, no force is needed at all. If you're using force here, stop, because you will break pins. After that, you're gonna take the lever, you're gonna pull it down, straight down, and it should just lock into place, and you have your CPU installed. Next, we install the CPU cooler. If you're using the stock cooler, which I'm assuming you are, because the build did not have any aftermarket coolers, you need to unscrew these 4 screws that hold these 2 clips together. So take your Phillips screwdriver and make sure you get that out of the way.
Oh my gosh, these are tight.
After they're unscrewed, put them back in the motherboard box just so you don't lose them and you have them for later. Cool. After that, you are ready to take out the CPU cooler from your CPU box.
Here's mine right here.
And you are ready to install it. An important part of installing your CPU cooler is making sure you have thermal paste. Your CPU cooler on the back should have thermal paste pre-installed if you've never used it before. Of course, I have used this Ryzen 3 2200G for reviews and stuff, so I do not have any thermal paste pre-installed. It's already used up. Since you guys are buying this completely brand new, you will already have thermal paste installed, so you can completely skip this step. If you do not have any thermal paste installed, or if you're using an aftermarket cooler, then you will need some aftermarket thermal paste. I have some Arctic MX4, and I'm going to apply that directly to the CPU lid. Now, the application of thermal paste is a very polarizing topic in the computer world, but any kind of application should be okay. Just make sure you put about a pea-sized drop directly in the center. That should be good. And that's pretty much it. Now we are officially ready to install the CPU cooler. Again, if you have never opened up the CPU box before, then you will have thermal paste pre-installed here, and you do not have to do this step. So now I'm going to line up the screws of the CPU cooler with the screw holes on the back plate of the motherboard. There we go. And I'm making sure that this little ridge right here with the AMD logo is facing this way, so I'm not blocking any of my DIMM slots on the right. After you do that, grab your screwdriver and screw these in an X pattern. It's okay if you have to apply a little bit of force. Now that that's screwed in, take this header right here and plug it into the CPU fan header that should be at the top of your motherboard. It will go in. There we go. Just to give everyone a closer look, that is the CPU fan header, in case you couldn't see it from all the way down there. After that, we are going to install our RAM or memory. Before we do that, make sure you open the DIMM slots by pulling back on these top levers right here. Although we are only going to use 2 of the slots, just pull back on all 4. You can always put them back. All right, so now we're going to open up our RAM/memory.
There we go. It's 1 stick. That's 2 sticks.
You can put the box with your other boxes. When installing memory, you want to make sure you put the sticks in the same colored slot. So I want to make sure I put these 2 sticks in either the white slots or the black slots. Doesn't matter which one, just make sure they are the same color. This allows the memory to run in dual channel, which is theoretically double the throughput of running in single channel. You don't want that. Installing memory is pretty simple. You'll have a notch on the RAM right here that will line up with one of the notches on the DIMM slot. Now, if you don't want to sit there and make sure that it's angled correctly, you can also look at where the label of the memory is, and you can make sure it's facing towards the CPU cooler. That pretty much guarantees that it's facing the right direction. So after you do that, just slide it into the DIMM slots and then push down on both ends until it clicks into place. Awesome, so now we have most of the main components installed in the motherboard, and now is where I recommend that you test out the motherboard and all of its components installed with your power supply to make sure that everything is running properly. This is optional, but it also reduces headaches in the future in case something doesn't go quite right when you first turn on the computer. This ensures that all of your current components installed are working. Awesome, so now we have most of the main components installed in the motherboard, and now is where I recommend that you test out the motherboard and all of its components installed with your power supply to make sure that everything is running properly. This is optional, but it also reduces headaches in the future in case something doesn't go quite right when you first turn on the computer. This ensures that all of your current components installed are working. For this section, make sure you're by an outlet and you have your monitor ready, as well as an HDMI cable or a DVI-D cable. So now you're going to grab your power supply, which is the EVGA 450 BRBV or BT, depending on the one that you bought. Make sure you unbox it and put the box somewhere with your other boxes. Now that your power supply is unboxed, you're going to plug in 2 different cables from the power supply into the motherboard. So one of them is going to be the ATX motherboard 24-pin cable, and the other one, if I can find it, is going to be the CPU 8-pin or 4x4 pin cable, and it is right here. And in case you don't know what these look like, they will have labels on them. Like this one says 20+4 for the ATX motherboard, and then this one says CPU and CPU. This is what the motherboard 24-pin cable looks like. As you can see, there's the 20 and the 4-pin. They will be separated. Basically, all you have to do is you have to take the 4-pin. It should have these 2 notches on either side of it. You're gonna connect it to the 20-pin. Basically, you're gonna pull up the 4-pin, push it into the 20-pin, and then pull it down, and it should connect like that. And then after that, you are going to face it, the clip, this part right here, you're gonna face it away from the RAM and the CPU cooler, and you're gonna plug it in to the motherboard right here. It's a little bit stiff, but just keep pushing down until you hear a click. Or you may not hear a click, but just push down until it goes all the way in. So the second cable that we're going to install is the CPU pin. It's going to be 2 4-pins for a total of 8. You don't have to clip them together. Just put them right next to each other, and then you're going to install them onto the CPU 8-pin connector on the motherboard at the top left. These clips right here, these clips are going to be facing away from the motherboard, so downwards like that. Just plug them in, and you're good. So now that the power supply cables are installed, make sure your monitor is plugged in. Take whatever cable that you're using from your monitor, such as an HDMI or DVI-D cable. Those are the only 2 that are compatible with the motherboard, and plug it into the respective plug on the left side of the motherboard. I'm using HDMI, so I'm going to plug it into the HDMI port right here. After that, take the power cable that came with your power supply, plug it in, and make sure the power supply is on by flipping the switch at the back. Now, everything is currently on. The motherboard is receiving power, so try not to touch anything metal that's connected to the motherboard. So what do we do from here? How do you turn on the computer? There is no power button. Well, there are actually pins down here where if you short them, then it will receive power and you'll be able to see something hopefully on your monitor, meaning that everything is working. Now, I'll give you guys a closer look so you can see exactly which pins I'm talking about. Basically, you're going to use your Phillips screwdriver and you are going to touch the 2 pins that correspond to the power switch. And I'll give you guys a demonstration right now. And hopefully, once we do that, everything will be up and running and you'll get something on your monitor. So right here should be these 2 pins according to the guide. So as you guys can see, we are getting a picture from our monitor. There's the beauty. There's the monitor. Look at that. So now that you confirmed that everything so far is working properly, you can turn off the computer. Oh, whoops, didn't mean to. Silly me. Oh my gosh. Now that you've confirmed that everything is working properly, you can turn off the computer just by flipping the switch back here or by holding down the power switch pins with your screwdriver for a few seconds, and then it should turn off. After that, unplug everything. Actually, first, after that, make sure that your power supply is turned off and unplugged. And then once that's done, wait a couple of seconds, probably around 5 or 6, and then unplug everything from the motherboard.
So let's do that. Make sure I ground myself. Unplug this.
Unplug this. When you're unplugging power supply cables from the motherboard, there are going to be little flaps. Push down at the tip of the flaps and then pull up. They should just come out. The ATX one for the motherboard itself is going to be a little bit tough. You are going to have to use a little bit of force, and that's okay. And then after that, you're all set. Now that the current parts are tested and you know that they're working, we are ready to start prepping to install into our case. So unbox your computer case and take off both side panels.
So I'll do right now. These are not thumb screws. They're not thumb screws. Let me just use this.
take off both side panels. Usually cases like this have thumb screws, but you can still use your screwdriver to unscrew them or loosen them up, and then you can unscrew the rest using your fingers. Make sure the case is facing this way and we're ready to get started. Also, there will be protected film around the case and on your side panel. I will leave that on until the very end, just so you prevent scratches or anything else from happening. Once you're done with the build, you can peel it off and it'll be very satisfying. It's almost like the cherry on top. Now, you will see that the case comes with a ton of cables, which we will use en route later, and it also comes with zip ties and a few other goodies that are actually pretty useful and will help with cable management. So basically, these two packets you can take out of the case and put them to the side. I'm gonna dump them over there. And these cables we will worry about briefly. So now we're ready to prep to install the motherboard. Now we can't just take the motherboard and install it directly inside of the case, because the metal of the motherboard will touch the metal of the case and that can short things out. So we're gonna install these things called standoffs, and it's pretty self-explanatory. They're non-conductive metal or plastic components that rise up the motherboard, so the PCB of this doesn't touch the metal backing of that. And standoffs are included with the case. They were in that little baggie that was installed right here and we kind of threw off to the side. But before you do that, you want to make sure you line up the motherboard correctly so you see exactly where you have to install the standoffs. So you're going to place it down here, make sure that this part, which is the IO region, is facing outward and is in this little gap right here. You're going to kind of push it over and kind of feel and see where the standoffs are going to go. So some of them are already pre-installed, like this one right here is already pre-installed and this one right here is already pre-installed, and those are kind of like guides to help you figure out exactly where you need to install your standoffs. So where we need to put them, we're going to have these little circular holes in the motherboard. So these two are already there, so we're good there. So we need one right here on the top left, second one top right, third one middle right, fourth one, actually we're good right there, I believe. We need a fourth one at the bottom, and then we need a fifth one on bottom left, and then a fifth one, sixth one, or is that already pre-installed? I think that's already pre-installed. So we need like 5 to 6 standoffs. This is kind of hard to see, but that is the standoff. That is what it looks like. And I dropped it. So you can screw standoffs directly into the little holes on the case, but this case actually comes with a standoff screwer, which is pretty neat because these standoffs can get stuck super easily, and that's very annoying. So what you can do is you can put the standoff inside of the little screw thing right here. This is compatible with the Phillips screwdriver, so you're gonna just do that. So that's what it looks like. And then we're going to screw it in to all of the locations that we mentioned previously. All right, so that's one. And then you just kind of keep going. I hope you get the gist. Another way that you can make sure that you are putting the standoffs in the correct location, we know that our motherboard form factor is micro ATX. Every single place that you see a little M, install a standoff there. That stands for micro and micro ATX. So of course, that's where the standoffs will go. So now that you have all of your standoffs installed, the next thing that we want to install is the motherboard IO shield. Now this is going to come with the motherboard. So we're going to get our motherboard box. Should be somewhere underneath all of this annoying cardboard. And it's this piece of metal right here. Oh my gosh, it's so annoying.
Hopefully it's good ASMR though. It's good ASMR, I'm okay with it.
So the IO shield does exactly what you would think. It shields the IO ports on the motherboard. So what we want to do here is we want to make sure it's lined up properly with the motherboard. So let's grab that just to demonstrate for you guys. So this is the IO shield. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that it's properly lined up with the motherboard. Just like that. Yep, so that looks like a pretty good fit. So after you make sure that that's done, it's gonna be oriented this way. So the motherboard IO shield is gonna be facing this direction. And to install it, to install the IO shield, all we have to do is put it against the little ridge, the hole right here inside of the case. There should be an empty slot. So you can see my finger running through. Just gonna line it up, and you're gonna push against the IO shield in an X pattern. So grab the two corners, any two corners that are diagonal to each other, push in until you hear a soft click, and then do the same with the other corners. Also watch out, the IO shield is kind of sharp. There's definitely been blood for me trying to install IO shields. But yeah, that's pretty much it. This one is installed, and now we are finally ready to install the motherboard. So these are the types of screws that we are going to use to screw in the motherboard. You should have 12 of them, and they are the type C according to your case manual. They come with the case. So now you can grab your motherboard. Make sure you ground yourself first. You don't want to shock anything. Take your motherboard. You're gonna line it up with the IO shield and the standoffs. There we go. Just like that. And then you're gonna take these screws and screw them in. You don't want to screw them too tightly, otherwise you might strip either the standoff or the screws. Now that the motherboard is installed, the next thing we're going to do is install any case fans that we have. So for this video, we have the Thermaltake Ring 12. It does have an LED blue light, and it's going to be our front intake fan. Now, case fans are not necessary for the build, and this case actually comes with one rear exhaust 120mm fan, which will be perfectly fine for this computer. This case fan will just add a little bit more extra airflow into the case and cause temperatures to drop a tiny bit. But again, if you don't have one, it's not the end of the world. Your computer will run just fine. Since we want to install the fan in the front of the case, we do have to remove this front panel connector because it's in the way. So take your Phillips screwdriver and just unscrew these screws at the top and the bottom of the front panel connector, just to move them out of the way. Make sure you don't lose the screws because you will be needing them to screw it back in.
I really don't want to break anything. You can just pull it off. Right? There's like a clicking mechanism somewhere here. Oh my gosh.
There are also two screws at the front that you need to unscrew as well. After you do that, it should literally just like slide right off. After that's done, make sure you open up your case fan. It will come with the fan itself, a few screws that we will need to install it, and a manual. You can put the manual and any other accessories minus the screws away. And so this is the case fan itself. This is going to be an intake fan at the front, and air is going to blow through this way. Air can only go through one way on the fan, and it's going to go through here. And since we want the air to come in from the front, we are going to install it with the Thermaltake logo facing away from the rest of the components. The fan we're installing will be plugged into one of the fan headers on the motherboard. Just from quick inspection, I see that we have a fan header above the PCIe slot, and I see that we have another fan header down at the bottom left corner of the motherboard. Now we do have a rear fan installed, and I can already tell you that this is probably going to go best plugged into the fan header above the PCIe slot. So the blue fan that we're about to install should go to the one that's at the bottom left of the motherboard. So just be sure that the length of the cable can route from where you want to install it, and I've already checked that and it's going to be fine. So after that, we can begin installing it. So I'm going to turn the case on its front just so you guys can see it. I'm going to make sure that the Thermaltake logo is facing towards me, so that means that air is being pulled in. I'm going to line it up about where I had it before, so I will say about right there is good. I'm going to take the cable and I'm going to route it through one of the holes on the side of the case. So there are two big rectangular holes right here. I'm gonna route this cable through here. I'm going to line it up just like this with these 4 holes. And after I've lined it up, I'm going to take the screws that came with the fan and I'm going to screw them into each of these 4 holes. After you've screwed in the fan, you're going to take the fan cable that you routed through the side of the case and you're going to put it through this hole right here. And that should correspond to the system fan header at the bottom left of the motherboard. And you're just gonna plug it in right here. Awesome. So now your system fan is installed. Once you're done, take your front panel header, line up these little, oh, well, that totally just broke off, but that's okay. You're gonna line up these little rivets right here with the holes. They should lock into place. And you're gonna take your screws and screw it back in.
So this is, there we go.
Remember to screw in all 4 screws. After that's done, we are going to plug in all of the connectors from the front panel. So this one right here, the big black one, this is your USB 3 port, and it's going to plug into the J USB 3 header that you see right here at the bottom right of the motherboard. So let's plug that in. After that, you're going to take the cable that says HD audio. This can also say AC97. They're essentially the same thing for all intents and purposes. And you're going to plug it into the J Audio 1 at the bottom left of your motherboard right here. So you're going to take this and actually let's reroute this cable because we don't want it to stretch all the way across.
So let's pull this out.
Going to route it the same way that we routed the fan cable through here. Awesome. So now let's turn it around and stuff fell, but that's okay. And we're going to plug it in right here. And the last front panel part is the actual buttons, like the power button, the reset button, things of that sort. And this is probably the most annoying part of the entire build, especially for first-time builders. These power connectors right here, you have to connect them to the proper pins under JFP1. This set of pins that I'm circling right here. And I'm gonna have a blown up diagram and get a little bit closer to the pin so you guys can get a better idea of where to put which part. But if you ever get lost, you can always check your manual. And also, this motherboard is really awesome, and a lot of modern motherboards are like this. There's also little guides right here that tell you exactly where each one of these pins go. So if you follow this properly, it's really not very difficult. It looks kind of hard. You will be able to plug these in correctly. So we're gonna do that. And that is everything plugged in. Now, again, I'm sorry, there's no good way to show how to do this. And although these pins are pretty universal in their order for all kinds of motherboards, it's best just that you check the manual and line up each of the headers with each of the pins. After that, we are going to install our storage devices. The first one being the SSD. Now there are 2 parts that you will need in order to install the SSD in the Q300L, and they come with the case screws. The first one is part E. It's a rubbery type of component, and the second one is just a screw that will go inside of the rubbery component, just like that. So take your SSD out of its box and make sure that it's facing up with the screws, the 4 screws at each corner, visible to you. So you're going to take the rubbery part, part E. Let me take the screw out. and you're gonna make sure that the smaller circle is on top and the bigger circle is at the bottom. Place it at one of the four corners. And then you're going to take your screw, put it inside each of the holes, and then screw it in to the hole located on top of the SSD. Do that for each of the four corners, and then you'll be ready to install it and put it on the case. All right, let me just stop it there. Now that your SSD is prepped and ready to go, you're basically going to make sure that these connections, the SATA connections, are facing the center of the case. After that, you're going to flip it over, and you're going to make sure that the screw lines up with each of these screws in the four corners line up with each of the large circles located right here on the case. So after you do that, it should be relatively simple. After that, you're gonna slide it to the left. You're gonna use a little bit of force, and that should lock it in place. The first step to installing the hard drive, we are going to unscrew the hard drive bay located right here. And after that, make sure you take your hard drive out of its box if you haven't already. Now, don't completely take off the hard drive bay yet, because there's a quick and easy way to make sure that you install it in the correct orientation. The hard drive is going to end up, if I can get these cables out of the way, it's going to end up sitting just like this. So what you want to do is put your hard drive this way. I would just slide it over a little bit, and then I would pull out the hard drive bay. And since the hard drive is going to be on top of the hard drive bay, you're gonna flip it like that, turn it over. After that, you're gonna line up the screw holes of the bay with the holes of the hard drive. And then you're going to use the same screws, Type C, that you use to screw in your motherboard with this bay and hard drive. After the hard drive is completely screwed in, then put it back inside of the case the way that you initially saw it. Awesome. Now your storage devices are fully installed. Well, not fully just yet, but close enough. Let me redo that part. Oh my gosh. Cool. Now your hard drives and your SSDs are installed. All right guys, so we are so close to being done. We just have the power supply and the graphics card left in that order. So installing a power supply is pretty simple. It's only routing the cables that can get a little bit difficult. But the first thing we have to do on this case is we have to remove this little power supply cover right here. There are going to be 4 screws at the back, so just unscrew those. Now that you have the power supply cover taken out from your case, you're going to get the power supply, which should already be unboxed if you did the testing earlier in the video. And we want the fan to be facing downward. It is going to be installed at the bottom of the case, and we want the fan to be facing this way. So the logo should be facing you. You should be able to read it after you've installed the power supply. So what you're going to do is you're going to turn the power supply upwards so you can see the power switch. And you're going to take the power supply cover and you're going to line it up with each of the holes. Each of the screw holes in the power supply. So there's a screw hole. As you can see, there is one screw hole right here. There's another one over here. There's one right here, and the last 4th one is over here. And the same screws that you use to install your motherboard will be the same screws that you use to install this power supply cover.
I don't want a lot for Christmas. There is just one thing I need. I'm caring about the presents underneath the Christmas tree. I don't need to hang my stockings there upon the fireplace. Santa Claus will make me happy with the joy of Christmas Day. I just want you for my own.
Am I out of motherboard screws? Once you have the cover installed, you are going to make sure the label's facing you, and you're going to put it at the bottom of the case. Watch out for all the wires that you've previously installed, and gently slide it into the bottom.
Just want to make sure everything's good and lined up.
All right, and then after that, just make sure you screw in the remaining 4 holes at the back. Now we're going to route all of our cables, do some very basic cable management, and plug everything in before we install the final component, our graphics card. So as you can see, there are a crap ton of wires, and because this is not a modular power supply, we have to use all of them. Well, we don't have to plug in all of them, but we have to keep all of them connected to the power supply. Thankfully, the Q300L does have a pretty open back, so we can just stuff a lot of these back there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to group all of these wires together, and I'm going to route them through this big hole right here. So you can see, let me see if you guys, yeah, this one right here.
So the best way to do this is actually, this is gonna be interesting.
So now that we've done that, we have all of our cables through the big hole. We're ready to route and start plugging stuff in. So there are only 4 different cables that we need out of the 6 total. These 2 you just put to the side. So we need the motherboard cable right here, the 24 pin, the 20+4 pin. That's the first one that's crucial. The second one is the CPU power, which is the two 4-pin connectors right here. The third one is the PCIe connector, which is used for the graphics card. And then the fourth one is the SATA connectors, which will be used for all of our storage devices. And since we're already here, let's plug in the rear exhaust fan as well. So remove the zip tie from it if you haven't already, and plug it into the system fan header 1 directly above the PCIe socket. Now, I do like to make my cable management a little bit kind of pretty, if that makes any sense. So I like to wrap this wire, the fan wire, around the bottom edge of the fan, and then kind of around the shroud of the VRM heatsink, and then I'll plug it in. That way, the wire is a little bit less noticeable and it gives you a slightly cleaner look. Next up, we're going to finish the hard drive connections at the back. So the first thing that we're going to do actually is we're going to go into our motherboard box and we're going to pull out the SATA cables that came with it. Each new motherboard should come with at least 2 SATA cables, and this one is no different. And each storage device deserves at least 1 SATA cable, at least an SSD that's not through an M.2 slot, and a standard hard drive.
That's 1 cable. 2 cables. Alright, so this is, see if I can get a closer look.
This is what a SATA cable looks like. As you can see, it has an L-shaped connection. One end will go directly into the motherboard and another end will go directly into the storage device. So at the bottom of each storage device, right here on the SSD and right down here on the hard drive, you will see a small L-shaped port. Plug in one end of the SATA cable into each of the ports. into the motherboard. I routed the SATA cables through the same hole as my motherboard ATX 24 pin. So right here, you'll have 2 SATA cables or 2 SATA ports from your motherboard. And then this block right here, this black one, also has 2 SATA ports. So I'm gonna use these 2 that are not a part of the block. I'm gonna plug my SSD cable directly into SATA 1 or the lower number SATA port. And I'm gonna plug my hard drive cable into SATA 2 or the higher number SATA port. Now, it doesn't matter which one you plug each of the storage devices into because you can change the settings in the BIOS. It's pretty simple, but just for the sake of simplicity and not having to do that, we can just make sure we get it done here. And lastly, to finish up these storage devices, we're going to take the SATA power cables that actually power the devices from the power supply. This will focus. There we go. And we're gonna plug them into the SSD and the hard drive. Again, these are similar to the SATA cables, the SATA data cables. These are L-shaped. You're just gonna plug them into the L-shaped port on the SSD and also the L-shaped port on the hard drive. This is gonna get messy, but that's okay. We will cable manage later. And the very last thing that we need to do is install the video card. Now, this is actually pretty straightforward and simple. Take out your video card. Here's the Gigabyte Aorus RX 570. And what you want to do is you want to, similar to when we first installed the motherboard, you want to kind of line up the video card with the PCIe slot and check and see which IO slots on the left side of the case need to come out in order for the video card to fit. So if you do that, you will see that the first 2 IO slots, and I'll give you guys a closer up so you know exactly what I'm talking about, need to be removed in order for these slots right here on the video card to be sticking out of the case. And now we can install the video card. So take your video card, make sure that the fan is facing downwards towards the power supply. This is very, very important. Otherwise, the PCIe slot right here will not match the PCIe slot on the motherboard. You see how there's a little notch right here? Yeah, you see that? Yeah, so those things should match. So all you have to do after that is you have to line it up. Make sure that it's all the way pushed to the edge of the case so the IO slots are hitting the metal side of the case. Make sure that the lines and the notches in the PCIe slots on the card and on the motherboard are lined up. And then after that, it should kind of fall into place, but you have to push it down to make sure that it locks in. There you go. So after you do that, the white flap right here should actually move a little bit to the left. So this is it when it's unlocked. It should be down like that. Once it's locked, it should be all the way in, just like that. The last thing we have to do is plug in the video card to the power supply. So as you can see, this is the PCIe cable from the power supply, and this video card uses 8 pins. This PCIe cable has 6 pins and then an extra 2 pins. So similar to what we did with the motherboard power connector, you're just gonna connect the 6 pin to the 8 pin. You're gonna have the PCIe logo facing you, and then you're gonna have it face away from you, and then you're gonna plug it straight in
to the video card. So it works. Or it might not work, but until the clip is secure.
And there you go, guys. You've literally built your very first gaming computer, or second or third, or how many ever you wanted to build. But congratulations, like, it's completely built. Now, for the moment of truth, we have to plug everything in and pray that it works on the first boot. So get your monitor, get your keyboard, get your mouse, plug everything in, and we're gonna see if this thing will work. All right, so we're about ready to turn on the computer and test it. A few things first, of course, make sure your computer is plugged in, make sure the power switch is turned in the on position, make sure you have your keyboard plugged in. Once we turn on the computer, we're gonna keep on tapping the delete key on the keyboard to enter the BIOS. And lastly, make sure you plug in your monitor directly into your graphics card, so the I/O slots on your graphics card and not on your motherboard. All right, so moment of truth. Let's see just how this works. All right, so that's a good sign. Let's keep tapping the delete key. Will it turn on? Is it troubleshooting time? Whew, okay. All right, so here we are with the finished build. And when I went to turn on the computer, I actually didn't get any display on my monitor. And so I was a little bit confused because everything else was working perfectly fine when I tested it outside of the case, but I didn't get any display on the monitor once I connected it to my video card. And so that's when I began to troubleshoot. It ended up being that my HDMI port just wasn't sending out any signal, so I switched out my HDMI cable with a DVI-D cable. I plugged that into the back of my video card and it worked first time on the first boot. Now, I was a little bit frustrated that it happened, but I'm actually glad that it happened now because it kind of gives you an idea of the kind of issues that you will see when you build your first computer. Sometimes when you turn it on after putting all of the parts in, you may not get the results that you wanted, and that's okay. Stay calm and just try to troubleshoot. A lot of modern components like this motherboard specifically actually have easy debug LEDs right here on the side that tell you exactly which part of your setup needs to be checked. That's the error that's happening. Now, I didn't have any issues here, and that's why I was a little bit frustrated, but I decided to just try things out, and that's exactly what happened. Now the computer is running just fine. Another good way to debug is with beep codes. So you can install a speaker right here. It's the JFP2 header that's right above the front panel header. And your motherboard should come with a speaker. I didn't see one in the ASRock B450M Bazooka. Otherwise, I would have shown you guys how to install it. But it's very, very simple. You literally just take the 4 pins that are on the 4-pin sockets that are on the speaker, and then you plug it straight into here. And if you get a single beep after you turn on the computer, then that means that it's posting properly and everything is working. If you get any other kind of beep sequence or pattern, then that means that something is wrong, and each specific beep sequence or pattern correlates to a different device that is improperly working. But besides that, the computer is completely built. Now, if you want, you could literally just stuff the rest of these cables in the back, close both side panels, and call it a day. But I do think that cable management is important. You want your build to look good. You want to show it off to people. So let's do some cable management just to make this a little bit cleaner. All right, now with all of that being said, the computer is pretty much finished. I'm just gonna use some of the zip ties that came with the case to group a lot of the cables together, make this look a little bit prettier, because right now they're just cables kind of like mangled all over the place. And then, yeah, put on the side panels and then we'll be good to go. So you have finally completed your first computer build, or second or third, it doesn't really matter, but congratulations nonetheless. This thing looks awesome. Currently, it's just a hunk of metal inside of another hunk of metal because we don't have any software on it. So what we're going to do in this part of the tutorial, we are going to first update the BIOS if needed. We're going to optimize some BIOS settings. We're going to install Windows, which is completely free. And then we're going to install all of our drivers and get ready to finally play some computer games. So first things first, the materials you need for part 3 of this tutorial. You'll need a flash drive with at least 8 gigabytes of free storage, and then you'll also need an external computer or laptop that has Windows running on it so you can install the files that you need to update the BIOS and the Windows ISO. Alright, so to update our BIOS first, we need to get the updated BIOS file from our motherboard manufacturer's website. So plug in your USB drive into your laptop or computer. Make sure you Google the model of the motherboard that you have. Ours is the MSI B450M Bazooka. I will also have the download link for the latest BIOS as of recording and uploading this video that is available, so you don't have to do all the Googling. But go to the site, make sure you download the BIOS file. It should be under the support tab, and you're going to extract all of the contents of the zipped folder onto your USB flash drive. Once that's done, get your USB flash drive, plug it into your computer. There we go. Make sure it's connected to a monitor and a keyboard, and we're gonna start updating the BIOS. After that, turn on your computer and keep tapping the delete key until you make it to your computer's BIOS. With your peripherals and your flash drive that has the new BIOS plugged into your computer, you can turn on your computer and tap the delete key multiple times until the BIOS splash screen shows up. Cool. After that, take your mouse and drag the mouse over to the left where you see M flash. Click on that and then press yes. This is the screen that you should see once you enter M flash mode. You're going to open the folder that you extracted to the flash drive, and then you're going to double click on the H2O file. Select yes. After this, the BIOS will be updating. It will take a few minutes to do so, but don't do anything. Just let the computer do its business, and once you come back, it'll be updated. So we're gonna go to Advanced up here, and then we're going to click on Overclock. Now, you can overclock your CPU if you want to. I won't get into this for the sake of brevity in this video, but we're gonna go down to DRAM frequency. We're gonna select 2667 right here. We're gonna click on Advanced DRAM Configuration. We're gonna select DRAM voltage, and we're gonna press the plus sign on our keyboard, or you can actually type in the voltage that you want, but we're gonna press the plus sign on our keyboard until we reach 1.3 volts. We're gonna press F10 to save. Select yes, and then it should restart. After it restarts, keep tapping delete again to get back into the BIOS, just so we can confirm that the memory is running at 2667. And there you go. As you can see in the top middle, the memory speed is at 2667. After you've updated your BIOS, we are ready to install Windows. So take out the USB flash drive that you plugged in that had your BIOS file on it, plug it into your external laptop. We are now going to go to Microsoft's official website and download their Microsoft Windows download tool. Now this tool will install Windows directly onto your USB, so the USB will become a bootable device that you can access from your motherboard's BIOS. I'll have a link to the download tool in the description. After you've plugged in your USB device and you've installed the download tool, open it up and select your USB location. After that, make sure you choose that you want to make this a bootable device. You do not want to install Windows on your external laptop or computer. Make sure it's a clean install and start the Windows installation on your USB device. This is going to take approximately 20 to 40 minutes, so you can go do something again until it's done. After overclocking your memory, we're going to go back into the Advanced tab. Advanced, there we go. We're going to click on Settings on the left. Click on Boot. We're going to scroll down. We're going to make the first boot option UEFI USB key. It should be the USB drive that you have plugged in. And we're going to make the second boot option the Windows Boot Manager. And your first port should be the SATA SSD. So click that. After that, we're going to save. Click yes. And then we're going to boot back into the BIOS. So now that we've optimized our BIOS settings, we are ready to install Windows. After you've installed Windows on your USB device, plug it back into your computer and restart the computer. As the computer restarts, keep tapping F11 so you can bring up the boot menu. Once you're at the boot menu, make sure you choose UEFI SanDisk Partition 1 or UEFI USB disk or whatever else the name of your USB disk is. The Windows splash screen should pop up, signaling that you're ready to install Windows. So choose the language that you want and your keyboard input method. Select Next. Select Install Now. Now here, if you bought Windows for about $100, you can put your product key here, but you don't have to. You can use Windows completely free and legally. Just select I do not have a product key. Now here is where you choose the mode of Windows that you want. Make sure it's x64, which is 64-bit, and they all are. Home is definitely enough for what you need as a personal user, but you can use Pro if you want a little bit more functionality. After that, select Next. Accept the terms. After this, you're going to select Install. We are not upgrading Windows, we are creating a new Windows partition. If you have any partitions here, delete all of them because we want a clean install. As you can see here, we have two different drives. The 111 gigabyte one is our SSD, and the 930 gigabyte one is our 1 terabyte hard drive. We want to install Windows on our SSD, so select the drive 0 unallocated space, or whichever one is corresponding to your SSD. So click New and Apply. Click OK. After that, you will get a ton of partitions. Again, these are all just for recovery and for system reserves. Do not install Windows on any of these. We want to install Windows on the 111 gigabyte version, so keep selecting that. It should automatically default, and then click Next. After that, Windows should install. This will take anywhere between 10 to 20 minutes, and it could restart several times. So again, just go do whatever you want until it's done. When this part of the Windows installation comes up, just follow the steps on screen and you're pretty much set. Now that you have Windows completely installed, what we have to do now is install our video card drivers. So I will have the download link to the RX 570 drivers in the description, but in case you do not have an RX 570 or an AMD video card, you can find the drivers by going to either AMD or NVIDIA's main website, or just searching up the model of your video card and then drivers, and then clicking on one of the links. So what we're gonna do here is download the drivers on our USB drive from an external. So what we're gonna do here is download the drivers onto the USB drive using your external laptop or device. We're gonna plug it into our computer, and then we are going to install the drivers. Pretty simple and straightforward. After we have our drivers installed, we want to create a system restore point. So this is just a precaution, just in case something goes wrong. We want to be able to go back to a previous time in Windows when everything was fine. So go to your search bar and just search System Restore and select Create a System Restore Point. Awesome. So here we're going to click on Local Disk C. We're going to select Configure. We're going to turn on system protection, max usage, maybe 5%. Select Apply and OK. And then after that, click Create. We're going to label this Beginning. That's Beginning. We don't want that. We want Beginning. Click Create, and it should create a system restore point. After that, press OK, and you're good to go on that end. Sweet. And the very last thing that we want to do is make sure that our 1 terabyte hard drive is available. So right now it is being detected, but it's not showing up in Windows. And I'll give you guys just a look at that. If we go to this PC, we only see our USB drive and we see our 120 gigabyte SSD. But we do have a 1 terabyte hard drive installed. It's just not showing here. So what we want to do is right click on this PC. We want to click on Manage. We want to click on Disk Management under Storage. And then we want to right click on this disk right here. The 930 gigs is our 1 terabyte drive. As you can see, it's unallocated. So right click this and click New Simple Volume. Select Next again, and you can assign it whatever letter you want. I'm just going to leave it as the default E. We're going to format this as NTFS. Select Next. Oh, you can also label this. I'm going to label this Extra Storage. After that, click Finish. And there you go. It is now shown up right here. So basically with the 120 gigabyte SSD, this is where you want to put all of your quick programs that you use. Say you're a music developer, you might want to put all of your music applications such as FL Studio on your SSD. And then on your storage devices, you want to put your larger files. That way your SSD doesn't get eaten up for space, and maybe your larger games. Now that all of that is done, you are ready to install all of your games. So we're currently playing Overwatch at 1080p using the Ultra preset, 100% resolution scale. Oh! Come on, come on. Oh no, I'm such a bad healer. I'm such a bad healer. I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. I'm really bad at Overwatch. That's what happens when you use bots to benchmark 24/7. Oh well. All right, so now we're playing Fortnite at 1080p using the high preset, one below epic. Let's drop with Salty Springs. I want to get right into the action. Usually whenever I do benchmarks, I drop right by the bottom of Leaky Lake, or now Loot Lake, unless they changed it again. And I try to avoid as many people as possible because I do not like confrontation. Let's see what happens over here. Just to let you guys know, I am buns at Fortnite. Also, that FPS seems kind of low for an RX 570. Should I do it? Should I confront? Yeah, I can take him. Okay, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die. Yeah, I don't really have weapons. How do you kill people in this game? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, too many people. I'm totally gonna die. Where's this person? Actually, this person's gonna, can we team up? No, whoa. You got too much dip in your chip, sonny. What's going on? All right, well, I died. And the last game we're gonna play is Fortnite's bougie brother, PUBG. And surprisingly, it's running better than Fortnite, at least during the drop, which I did not expect at all. I never thought PUBG would be running as smoothly as it's running right now. All right, again, we're gonna drop in a pretty high area. Oh, sorry, the gameplay settings, 1080p medium preset. So let's drop. Where do you wanna go? Do you wanna go in the building? On top of a building? I feel like I wouldn't know how to get down if I did that. So let's just go right here. Cool. All right, JK, PUBG is not running better than Fortnite anymore. It's still good enough. This game is pretty CPU dependent, so having a quad core chip isn't really helping out my case. Oh, whoa, buddy. Whoa. Calm down. Oh, no, why doesn't he have any clothes? Why is he naked? I died. So as you guys can see, this gaming computer is solid for the price. For only 500 bucks, you get yourself an entry-level machine that can play a lot of esports titles at pretty much maximum settings, over 60 FPS, but also some harder games like PUBG with modest settings. Now there is something that I didn't mention in the video, and that's basically internet connectivity. There are a few ways you can do this. One, you can either get yourself a Cat6 cable. They're pretty cheap, under 10 bucks on Amazon, and you can connect your computer straight to your router. But if you're like me and your room is a few levels above your router, you can't really run that cable through the house and into your computer. You can get yourself either a PCI Wi-Fi adapter or a USB Wi-Fi adapter. I'm currently using a USB Wi-Fi adapter on my main computer, and my router is 2 floors below me. And even then, with this USB adapter, I'm getting about 35 to 40 megabits per second download speed. So I can link the USB adapter that I'm using. It works just fine. Besides that, that's pretty much it for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it and you found it helpful. Let me know if there's anything I could improve upon. If you guys have any questions, just put them down in the comments below. And make sure you like, share, subscribe, all of that stuff. Visit the OzTalksHW channel. I mean, not the channel, the website, if you need more information or if you just want to check it out. Besides that, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.